And welcome back, everybody, to an episode of New York State of Sports here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. We here with you for the last Thursday in July. Training camp underway for both the Giants and the Jets. We'll dive into some of the big issues going in for both these teams as the football season got underway. As we said last week, this is a football-heavy episode. I'm excited to talk some Giants and Jets, talk about some hard knocks. Aaron Rodgers talks about Egypt. I hope you like the pyramid. But we'll dive into that. We'll do some college football. Syracuse, Rutgers, and Army have their respective media days this week. Army gets the first place vote in the new American Conference. Rutgers has a really optimistic schedule. And Syracuse, a new quarterback in Kyle McCord. We'll talk about all those things. The Mets complete a Subway Series shellacking of the Yankees. Well, it's all right in front of both teams. But the Mets are feeling a lot more optimistic as they get to take on the Braves this weekend. The Yankees, who knows where they go? And the trade deadline is Tuesday. Last chance to make some upgrades. We'll see what happens with the bullpen. And we'll dive into some possible names and both these teams go after the next couple of days. The Knicks reward Tom Thibodeau with a new contract extension. As their bulk of the season is almost done. And we'll talk some soccer. League Cup this week. International friendlies in the Tri-State area this week with exhibition. It's all coming up next here on New York State Sports and Ice Sports Radio. Direct feed for all the sports. We will see you in just a minute. Again, thank you for tuning in. Ricky Keeler here with you on New York State of Sports, IE Sports Radio, direct feed for all their sports. Really excited to get into what's going on here with football. I know we've done a lot of baseball on the show over the last couple of days or so, couple of weeks or so, actually. So I'm excited to get into some football today, and especially some college football, being that there's not really a big local team here, but we got a few of them to talk about. Of course, reminder, you can follow us on X, IG, Facebook, TikTok, at IE Sports Radio. And if you missed any part of this show, I don't know why you would, but hey, maybe you want to hear me again. Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, all those fine places to get your podcasts. Chances are that's where you will go to see them or listen to it. You could also go to each show has a page on IESportsRadio.com. So the link here, IESportsRadio.com/New York State Sports. You can catch any episodes you missed. You can follow me on X at Rickinator555. You can follow the show at NY State Sports IE. You can also email me, rickjkeeler@gmail.com. Any questions you have throughout the week, always happy to answer them here on the show. If you are listening live here on YouTube or X, feel free to join in here in the comments section. I want to hear from you. We'll talk some football. What are your expectations for the Giants and Jets this year? I was fortunate to go on the 3 and Out with Larry B, talking Jets this week on the AFC previews. He has a great job with those division shows. We're going to be doing the Giants next week, so we'll try not to spoil too much of that because I want to have some fun with that. But definitely want to get, what are your thoughts on the Jets, Giants, some of the local college football teams for the upcoming season, as we're going to be doing a little bit of those throughout the fall slate. But of course, this show and all of our shows brought to you by our two big sponsors, Planet Jerky Premium Brisket Beef Jerky, the jerky that is on a whole other planet, and Seal the Deal Wax Seals. Of course, by Cecilia B. She does some good stuff, especially if you're looking for the holiday season. Graduation season, of course, is over, but maybe you got to send something to your kids when they go to college. You do that as well. So we're going to take a brief word from our sponsors. We'll come back and we'll dive into the Giants and Jets a little bit. You're listening to New York State of Sports and IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all those sports. We'll be right back in just a minute.
IE Sports Radio fans, this show is brought to you by Planet Jerky Premium Brisket Beef Jerky. Planet Jerky is the official jerky of the 2022 California League champion Lake Elsinore Storm, single-A affiliate of the San Diego Padres. This all-brisket jerky has gluten-free options, contains no MSG, no sodium nitrate, is low in sugar, and high in protein. Go to their website at planetjerky.net and follow them on Instagram at Planet Jerky. Planet Jerky, the jerky that's on a whole other planet.
Hey there, IE Sports Radio fans. Be sure to check out our sponsor, Seal the Deal Wax Seals by Cecilia B. You just finished your very own wedding or baby shower invitations and you're looking for that extra special touch? Maybe you just wrote a letter to a relative or a friend and you want to add to their smile when they receive it. Then seal the deal with Cecilia's handmade sealing wax stamps for your invitations, letters, and gifts. You bring the deal, we'll bring the seal. You can find them on Instagram at sealthedeal_wax stamps and on Facebook, Seal the Deal Wax Seals.
And of course, be sure to follow our two awesome sponsors. Again, it's beach season, or again, you're thinking about a care package for your kids for college. Planet Jerky is probably a good idea to do for that because they got some cool flavors. Definitely a good snack for any summer classes or the beach. Or, again, it's Christmas in July. We need some holiday card stuff. So, Seal the Deal Wax Seals is perfect for those holiday cards. We thank those two for being awesome sponsors to the show. Definitely some good stuff there. Ricky Keeler back with you here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. Again, go to iesportsradio.com. You can find out all our shows, the schedules, all those things, or just go to the shop. You got some cool merch, get some t-shirts, some hats, all those fun things. So be sure to do that today. So let's start with the New York Giants. Again, we're going to dive into training camp underway for both teams. It's always that great. Remember, baseball, spring brings optimism, and the football, summer brings optimism. Everybody's 0-0 to start the year. It's great. And I think when you look at these two football teams, the Giants, I think the expectations are slightly lower. Obviously, we'll get into the Jets and their lofty expectations and what they expect from this year. But the Giants, I don't think, are in a position to where you're going to worry about whether or not they make the playoffs or not. And they're already off to a little bit of a rough start. When you look at their offensive line, Evan Neal goes on the PUP list. This is a guy the Giants have been looking for a lot out of right tackle, and he's been a big disappointment. Of course, made those really weird comments last year. They go out and they get Jermaine Illuminor in free agency. They now use him at right tackle. He went down yesterday in training camp. Looks to be okay, which is great news. They added John Runyon from the Packers. Of course, they've already got Andrew Thomas at left tackle. But if you watch this Hard Knocks season with the Giants, their main goal has been they've got to get the offensive line right. Because you can add all the skill position players you want around Daniel Jones. At least they've done that with Malik Neighbors, who looks really good. I tweeted from the show's account earlier today some of the great catches Neighbors was having in practice. He looks the part, albeit, again, it's training camp. But in order to make Daniel Jones the most effective, you've got to put pieces around him and you got to protect him. So if they're able to protect Daniel Jones, they're going to find success. That's plain and simple. Got to give him some time to move around because you don't have the running game at least as explosive as it used to be. They did add Devin Singletary, but really besides Singletary, you have Eric Gray. There's not really that number two back. And with Singletary, when his time with the Bills and the Texans, there was always that number two back they can turn to. You heard Joe Shane talk about that on Hard Knocks as well. So Singletary providing the bulk of the workload is going to be interesting, but already some problems with the offensive line, and that is something the Giants cannot afford to get wrong. They've gotten it wrong the last few years. It slowly started to get better. They added Schmitz into the mix as a rookie. He'll be going into year 2. And of course, Andrew Thomas, I think one of the better tackles in football. So they've already done some good things there to protect Daniel Jones, but that's going to be a big thing. What was a big thing yesterday, Daniel Jones completed his first practice. And again, 8 months removed from that ACL surgery, that's a big deal. Now, everything looks on track for week 1, but as Joe Shane and Brian Dable were talking about, you have to take it day by day when you have these kind of injuries. And of course, everybody thinks about if he doesn't finish the year, do they have the things that they can get out of certain money and stuff like that? Well, they get that down the road. If the Giants are going to contend for a playoff spot, they need Daniel Jones to be healthy. As good of a job Drew Lock did with the Seahawks in the brief time that he had, of course, everyone remembers the big win against the Eagles on Monday Night Football. They ultimately will only go as far as Daniel Jones takes them. You have to have a quarterback in this league, and if Daniel Jones ends up battling more injuries this year, then the Giants know that next year they have to get their quarterback in the draft or find a free agent quarterback out there. Hint, maybe Dak Prescott. I don't know. But ultimately, everything revolves around him. So it's good to see him at least get one practice under his belt. Everything feels good. But these things time will tell in the preseason. I don't know if you even see them that much in the preseason, especially with the injuries, but all in all, good things for Daniel Jones already. So what is my other concern for the Giants? I would say defensively, and I think in the secondary. They've got a good pass rush. When you add Brian Burns in the mix with Kayvon Thibodeau, you've got to love that. Dexter Lawrence up front. They add Jordan Phillips from the Bills. But the key is going to be in the secondary, and they've got a lot of young players in there. Jalen Mills is already on the non-football injury list. They try to add him for free safety. So you're looking at your 2 corners, and you got Deonte Banks, first rounder from last year, and Drew Phillips, a 3rd rounder in this year's draft. So your 2 corner spots are really young players. And you're going up in a division that's got CeeDee Lamb, A.J. Brown, Terry McLaurin, Devontae Smith. There's talent at receiver you've got to go up with 6 games out of the 16 that you're going with. So that's a big concern. Then you go to safety. They had Jason Pinnock as a waiver claim from the Jets, but they drafted Tyler Nubin in the 2nd round in Minnesota. You go to the other corner spot, Cordell Flott, 3rd round pick in 22. So this is a very young Giant secondary that's going to get tested. And how do you prevent a secondary from getting tested? Get after the quarterback. So there's a lot of pressure on Thibodeau, Burns, and Dexter Lawrence. They've got to get to the opposing quarterback quick. If they don't, teams are going to take advantage. As good of a potential as Banks has in the secondary spot, and I think I love what they did in the 2nd round taking Nubin, there are some concerns there that would alarm me from the Giants. So what do I think they are this year? I don't want to spoil it because, again, we're going to talk about this on the 3.5 division special next week. I think at this point they're a 7-8 win team. I think there's a lot going on. I think right now that the key is keeping the quarterback healthy, and I want to see some of these receivers emerge, particularly Jalen Hyatt. It's a guy they drafted out of Tennessee, big play capability. Let's see what he does because you got Slayton in the mix. Of course, we talk about Neighbors. They have to address tight end, especially with Theo Johnson starting the year on the PUP list, which is a little bit of a concern. But Daniel Bellinger is going to get some reps along with Lawrence Cager. When you look at Neighbors, Hyatt, they had Isaiah Hodgins in the mix. Slayton, Wan'Dale Robinson, now that he's healthy. Can he make an impact? They had Isaiah McKenzie. So there's potential in this Giant receiving core, but I think they need a little bit more, or they need at least Hyatt and Robinson to take that next step forward for the future. Speaking of receivers, it was real interesting watching the Hard Knocks this week where they were going into the whole draft. And what I loved about it was the receiver coach had Malik Neighbors, Roma Dunze, and Marvin Harrison Jr. in the room. They're going over film, and the receiver coach said, I'd love to draft all 3 of them. John Mara goes, if I had to have you on the clock to pick one, who'd you pick? And the coach said Neighbors. So you knew the Giants loved Neighbors from the very beginning. And what was interesting was Roma Dunze. They showed him in the interview room with Dable and Shane. And Dunze said, what kind of character are you guys looking for? And Dable was like, I've got a lot of good guys in the locker room already. So again, if you're reading into, okay, why was Neighbors the pick? Even when you looked at the Giants, when Shane's going over the draft scenarios, it didn't look like Odunze was gonna be the pick. I mean, it could have been Brock Bowers. Shane was talking about making a deal with Ryan Poles, the Bears GM. If Neighbors and Harrison went 4 or 5, whichever order, they were going to move down to 9, thinking the Bears were going to get a tackle. Meanwhile, we all know the Bears were trying to get Odunze at 6. So where the Giants have taken Bowers at 9, but they have taken a tackle, again, we don't know. But that was a really interesting episode on where the draft was. So let's talk some Jets. Of course, everybody wondered where in the world was Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers was looking at pyramids and hieroglyphics. He was in Egypt. Finally addressed that this week, and he came across as the I can do whatever I want because I'm Aaron Rodgers guy. And that's all well and good if you win, if you play, if you get through the season healthy. He has that rapport in the locker room with the players, but he doesn't have that with the media and with the fans. Right now, the goal for Aaron Rodgers, just focus on what you do on the football field. And he talked about how the team did find him. But then he mentions how he booked this trip a year in advance and was making excuses. Well, I showed up to the other OTAs and all that stuff. That's all well and good, but you got to be there for your football team. That to me is not an excuse. But this is the last time we're talking about it. Just found it interesting that he had to book this Egypt trip. He had to go look at the pyramids. Meanwhile, everybody else is in minicamp. But we've already dove into that so much. I don't want to do that anymore. The big issue right now for the Jets is Hassan Reddick, who's not in camp. And if you look at where the Jets stand with that issue, it just looks like this isn't changing anytime soon. And I'm going to read you the tweet from Connor Hughes, who talked about this situation. And it was one of those things where right now, basically, to make a long story short, the Jets aren't going to be negotiating with Reddick until he gets into camp. So from Hughes, the Jets made Reddick an extension offer before the trade. They were given permission by the Eagles to talk to Reddick and his reps. Reddick declined the offer. He wanted more. He wants about 25 to 28 million per year, which he isn't going to get. They didn't rule out they could discuss that Reddick performed. They wouldn't rule out an in-season extension. But right now that there is a holdout. And that's a big concern because it does give opportunity in camp for guys like Jermaine Johnson, Will McDonald. The Jets have some pass rushers, but when they lost Bryce Huff and John Franklin Myers, they needed to find a pass rush. And Reddick was the key, and they took a chance. And as I mentioned on the 3 and Out episode, Joe Douglas, maybe he thought that Reddick was going to come in good faith and make this happen. You got to do all your vetting before you make this kind of deal happen. So I appreciate the Jets for taking a stand. Like, look, until you show up to camp, we're not negotiating. And if they believe that they were given a false word from Reddick, then that's understandable. But right now, both these sides are at a crossroads, and Reddick needs to be in camp. They need, maybe not right now, but definitely in a couple weeks. You don't want this holdout to last longer than it needs to. Of course, the Jets have had their issues with holdouts before. Go back to their Hard Knocks many years back when Darrelle Revis was holding out, and HBO was showing videos of the diner that Revis was at. But Reddick, to me, is the big linchpin because that's why the Jets got him to help this pass rush. So what are the biggest question marks for the Jets? Receiver, I think, is one. They did add Mike Williams to help Garrett Wilson. I love the draft pick of Malachi Corley out of Western Kentucky in round 3. Speed guy, slot guy, maybe does some return game. What does Alan Lazard bounce back? Jets could really use that. One of the things you've seen in training camp so far is Tyler Conklin at tight end. I think he's going to be a big piece this year in the red zone. He was big for Zach Wilson last year. I think now you give Conklin a better quarterback. It's only going to make him better at tight end. But the Jets need that reliable number 2 behind Garrett Wilson. I can't say that's Mike Williams right now because he's starting the year, starting training camp on PUP. They need something more from the number 2 spot, whether that ends up being they call the Niners about Brandon Ayuk or they call the Raiders during the season about Devontae Adams. We'll see. But they're going to need a lot of Breece Hall in the backfield and in the receiving game. So to me, it's just who steps up as that number 2 behind Garrett Wilson to help Aaron Rodgers being that other option. The other thing is the offensive line. Now, they've addressed that in a big way, adding Tyron Smith, adding Morgan Moses. They've gone all over across the board. Vera Tucker is going to come back hopefully in the next week. John Simpson's another guy they've added. So the Jets have clearly, like the Giants, made offensive line a priority, drafted Fashanu in the first round. But how does this offensive line sync? Do they find the right combinations throughout preseason? And can they all come together as a unit? Because as we saw last year, if your offensive line isn't what it's supposed to be, your quarterback goes down 4 plays into the year. And even with Tyrod Taylor, if Aaron Rodgers does get hurt, you have a backup that can get the job done with protection. So to me, I'm looking at Tyrod Taylor as a guy that can win them some games if they need him to. But the offensive line has got to be the key for the Jets. And it's not so much that they have the bodies, I think, to be successful. It's can those bodies stay healthy throughout the year, particularly Smith. They took a chance on him. You can't rely on him to play all 16 games, which is why you drafted Fashanu. But how they get those two pieces together is going to be interesting. Let's take a look at the comments. Ralph is here. Good afternoon. Ricky, have a good show. We will get into the Mets. Mets gave the Yankees some humble pie during the Subway Series in a bad way. We are going to dive into all that later on in the show, but glad to hear from you, Ralph. If you missed it, Ralph was on the 3 and Out AFC North preview that aired earlier today. Of course, I think Russell Wilson had a quad injury or some kind of injury in camp today, which is interesting. But training camp's underway. As I said, optimism for all the football teams. Speaking of football, we are going to talk some college football coming up next. We are going to talk Syracuse. We are going to talk Rutgers, and we're going to talk Army. So as the NFL starts going, college starts to get going. Media days were this week. We'll dive into some of the cool comments from the coaches and talk about the expectations for all 3 of those teams going into the year. You're listening to New York State Sports and IE Sports Radio, direct feed for all those sports. We'll be right back in just a minute.
Sports fans, do you like teams that are tough, cities that are tougher, and fan bases that are passionate about their teams? How about teams that are historic and stadiums that are iconic? Then you belong in Chicago, and you need to check out Chi-Town Weekly. Join me, Adam Kernan, every week as we keep up with all things Chicago sports. Bears, Bulls, Blackhawks, Cubs, White Sox. We'll cover them all, plus more. The Windy City is always buzzing, and we'll keep you up on all the big games and major stories. So tune in to Chi-Town Weekly every week right here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
What's up, Pittsburgh? This is Ralph Delis, the host of the Injury Report on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. Are you that passionate diehard Steelers, Penguins, Pirates, or just a Pittsburgh sports fan? Then please join me on the Injury Report every Tuesday on IE Sports Radio, the direct feed for all that is sports. And I will update you on all that's black and gold, have you telling your Pittsburgh fans and friends what's up with Pittsburgh sports. Tune in Tuesday with me, Ralph Delis, the Injury Report on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. Let's go!
And welcome back, everybody, here to New York State of Sports and IE Sports Radio, direct feed for all that is sports. We'll get into baseball later, but the team I'm really intrigued by is the Pirates at the trade deadline because I think they could do some really interesting things. Like you've got Paul Skeens, who actually finally took a loss the other day, which I found really interesting. He hadn't lost since college, but that's going to be a fun team. But we'll talk baseball in a little bit. For now, we're going to dive into some college football. And as I said in the beginning of the show, I'm a big college football fan. I think the 12-team playoff is going to be great for the sport. It's going to lead to a lot more parity and a lot more fun storylines throughout the year. In terms of my background as a college football fan, I'm more of a Notre Dame guy, but there's a lot of cool local stories in the area this year. Maybe they won't be in the playoff, but they have the potential to have some good seasons. And let's start with Syracuse. Syracuse, to me, I think is a really interesting team in the ACC. Of course, the ACC looks a lot different this year. 17 teams. You got Cal, Stanford, SMU. So some West Coast trips for the Cuse in the near future. They bring in a new head coach in Fran Brown. I was watching ACC Media Day on the ACC network that's out in Charlotte because Syracuse was actually speaking today, Coach Fran Brown. This guy is really calm and cool and collected. He's very relaxed, laid back kind of guy. And I think that works for this day and age of player. Like Brown sets an expectation, knows the character, talks about commitment, care, and trust as the big pillars for Syracuse. And the one thing he talked about with Kyle McCord, who's a transfer from Ohio State, who's going to be the quarterback, he said that McCord brings instant leadership, work ethic, and they want him to scramble. So they don't want him to just be a pocket passer. And this is a guy that now knows he is the guy going forward. Like, remember at Ohio State last year, he was battling with 3 or 4 guys throughout the spring and the summer. And I think it's easier in this day and age if you're the quarterback going with the transfer portal and things like that, if you know this is your football team from the get-go. And Kyle McCord knows that. And he's got some good talent. He's got LaQuinn Allen in the backfield. They've added a couple of Georgia transfers at wide receiver. But the big thing for me is up front, and I love the transfer they added, Fadil Diggs, defensive lineman from Texas A&M. So Brown attacked the portal, one of the better recruiting classes that Syracuse has had in a long time. I mean, you look at Syracuse's schedule, and we're going to pull that up for you. It's a pretty favorable schedule. I think when you look at it, it's an interesting, because they don't have to play Florida State this year. And I think that's a good thing going forward for this team. They've got Ohio to begin the year, winnable game. But that game September 7th against Georgia Tech, that's going to be interesting. That could be a swing game going forward. Georgia Tech, of course, will play Florida State out in Ireland to begin the season in about a month's time. Then they play Stanford, but they get them at home on a Friday night. That's a winnable game. They got Holy Cross. Winnable game. So Syracuse could realistically, if they win that Georgia Tech game, start 4-0 before a Friday night game at UNLV. They do get NC State on the road. NC State's got Grayson McCall, former Coastal Carolina quarterback. They have a Thursday night game at Pitt. Virginia Tech, they get at home. But think about the tough game Syracuse has. And outside of NC State, they get Virginia Tech at home. They get Miami at home with Cam Ward. That should be a fun one. NC State's probably their toughest road game on the slate. Although I think BC is going to be better with Bill O'Brien at coach. They've got Cal going out west. So how Fran Brown prepares for going out west is going to be interesting. Right now, the over-under for Syracuse is 7 wins. That's tough. Again, that Georgia Tech game is going to determine a lot. I think they can be an 8-win team if all goes right. Because I'm looking at it, NC State would probably put a loss on the schedule. If you gave them the NC State loss, the Vatech loss, and the Miami loss, so that's 3 right there, they could afford to lose one more game to be an 8-win team. Whether that's UNLV, whether they slip up against Pitt, whether it's Cal. I think they can get to 8. I mean, getting Connecticut at home, I think that should be a win right after Thanksgiving. So a lot of good things going forward for Syracuse. I think Fran Brown is only can continue to recruit well. So that to me is a good sign for this Syracuse team, is they're going in the right direction. But again, when you're looking at these super conferences, you're kind of at the mercy of the schedule, where you have a 17, 18 team slate, and you've got to be able to contribute at a high level. So that's going to be a little bit tough on the Syracuse side. So let's talk Rutgers. And I'm really excited about this Rutgers team. Now, you look at the Scarlet Knights, Greg Schiano in the second stint there. This is a team that I thought made some strides last year. They won the Pinstripe Bowl. So Schiano wins the bowl at Rutgers. And they're going to benefit from one thing. The fact that the Big Ten doesn't have an East and West division. When Rutgers were in the East division, they were playing Penn State every year, Michigan every year, Ohio State every year, and they're going to lose games. But the key for the Scarlet Knights this season is going to be getting any big jump from their passing game. And they add Kalakamanis, the transfer from Minnesota. The offensive coordinator, Signati, has worked, not Signati, it's Siricata, I think. Siricata, one of the big thing is the key is their offensive coordinator. If Kalakamanis does something to help this team and at least gives them some threat of a passing game, they've got probably the best running back in the Big Ten in Kyle Monangai. Big talent. Led the Big Ten rushing. It's Kirk Soraka, by the way, the coordinator. But Monangai, Big Ten leading rusher, 8 touchdowns. The receiving core, I think, is going to be a little bit better. But the big thing is up front, their defense. They got Tyreen Powell, leading tackler last year. The captain, Mohamed Toure, they were at Big Ten Media Day. They have 9 all-conference performers from last year. And when you look at the preseason expectations for Rutgers, they were picked 9th in the Big Ten. Now, that seems low, but again, keep in mind there's 18 teams in the Big Ten. So to be in that upper tier is a big deal for Greg Schiano. And he even said it during Media Day, like, I didn't come here to win a bowl game. I came here to win a championship. And that's a big thing for this program. And then we're going to pull up the Rutgers schedule. And I kind of like what they're doing here. They've got Howard to begin the year. They've got Akron. That's 2 winnable games. Then the game in Blacksburg against Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech, Brent Fry's got a really good roster. That's going to be a tough game. But again, we look at the Scarlet Knights schedule, and no Penn State, no Ohio State, no Michigan. They get Washington on a Friday night at home. Remember, no Michael Penix for the Huskies. Jed Fish has a completely different offense. That's a winnable game for Rutgers. Going to Nebraska. I know Dylan Raiola is there for the Cornhuskers. Winnable game. Wisconsin at home. UCLA, they get at home. Now, they go to USC. Going to be tough, but Minnesota at home. They get Illinois. Michigan State's rebuilding. The Maryland game is going to be interesting. So when you look at this Rutgers schedule, they probably have the easiest schedule in the Big Ten. Does that mean they're going to win the Big Ten? No, but they don't get the Big Three. They don't get Oregon. That's a big deal. And I think right now the Rutgers over-under, I would say, is around 7. Rutgers, to me, looks like an 8-9 win football team this year, if all goes right. If they get that passing production, they're going to have no problem winning some games. And, Greg Schiano wants to return them to where Rutgers, remember, was competing in the Big East, trying to get to the BCS Bowls. It's a lot tougher in the Big Ten, but they probably have one of their better rosters they've had in a long time. Recruiting's getting better. They're slowly moving in the right direction. This kind of schedule, if you win 9 games and maybe you don't get to a playoff bowl or anything like that, but you build the program in the right direction. So all good things coming for Rutgers. I think they've got the right attitude going in. So now let's talk Army. Now, I love talking the Black Knights. Of course, West Point. Definitely want to make your way out to a game. It's really cool over there. But when we talk Army, what's interesting this year is they're in the American Conference. So they're actually in a conference for the first time. Usually they were independent. They also were picked 5th in the American and got a first-place vote. So it's an Army team that does have some talent. They're a team obviously known for their running game. They're going to run the football. That's definite. They returned their quarterback, Bryson Daly is back. They got their top 2 running backs, Kanye Udo and Hayden Reed. The key thing is going to be their defensive line and their linebacking core. They lose a lot of their front 7 from last year. That's going to hurt them, especially in this conference. But we look at Army's schedule. Now, what's interesting about the American is if, let's say in a hypothetical world, Army and Navy finish top 2, they would play in the American Championship game, which is the week before Army-Navy. In the future, there would be a chance whether you would get back-to-back weeks of these 2 schools. I don't think you'll get that this time around. But you start off with Lehigh. Their first American game is September 7th against Florida Atlantic. that's a swing game, I think, for Army. If they could steal a win there, that's going to really take their schedule in the right direction. They get Rice at home a couple weeks after that, winnable game. Then a Thursday night short week going to Temple. They go to Tulsa. They host UAB, host East Carolina. They host Air Force, the Commander-in-Chief's trophy, big deal. Getting them at home. North Texas. They get a matchup the 23rd, which is playing Notre Dame at Yankee Stadium, which will be really cool. That's a night game. I don't see Army beat Notre Dame at all. But they get Texas San Antonio, the Roadrunners, who they beat last year as well. So Army right now is at a 5.5. Jeff Monken, I think, can get this team to 6 wins. If they can steal one of those 2 road games, the Florida Atlantic, let's say 2 out of 3. Between Florida Atlantic, Temple, Tulsa, let's throw North Texas in there. So 2 out of 4. Let's say they win 2 road games. Then they win a bunch of their home games. That's a 6-7 win team. That's a bowl team. They don't even need the Navy game to make a bowl. So Monken's got one of his better teams in a while. I think they're feeling really confident about what they're doing. And overall, I think things are going in the right direction. So we'll dive into some other smaller schools throughout the year, but because Syracuse, Rutgers, and Army had their media days this week, I felt the need to kind of dive into that a little bit more. But we'll do like breakdowns, previews throughout the year. It's going to be a lot of fun. Taryn, good afternoon to you, my friend. Thank you. You had a good show so far as well. So again, send your comments. What are your thoughts? Giants, Jets, Syracuse, Rutgers, Army. What are you thinking for the upcoming season? It should be a lot of fun to not only cover the NFL, but cover some college football throughout the season. So let's take one more break. We'll come back. We'll dive into the Subway Series. The Mets are riding high, and the Yankees, well, everything's right in front of them. All the mediocrity is right in front of them. We'll talk about their woes and the trade deadline Tuesday. What's up next for both these teams? You're listening to New York State of Sports, 90 Sports Radio, direct feed for all their sports. We'll take one more break, and we'll wrap up the show with some baseball, basketball, and a little soccer coming up next.
What's happening, sports fans? Are you a fan of Southern California sports? Are you looking for a show hotter than a hot summer day in California? Then look no further than the SoCal Supreme Sports Show, where I talk about all things Southern California sports. That's right, all sports teams from Southern California. From the hard-hitting tackles of the NFL, to the killer crossovers and big three-pointers of the NBA and WNBA, to the grand slams of the MLB, to the bone-chilling goals of the NHL, and to the booming kicks of the MLS, the SoCal Supreme Sports Show has it all for you. Oh, and let us not forget about the college sports as well. So join me, Taryn Rodriguez, every week here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Welcome to the 305, aka the Magic City, and this is Magic City Scoreboard. I'm your host, JB, and right here we're going to talk anything Miami Dolphins, Miami Heat, Miami Hurricanes, Marlins, Panthers, and week right here on Magic City Scoreboard on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed to all that is sports.
Of course, Magic City Scoreboard, part of our other shows that take place here on the network on Thursday. You catch JB's show at 7 o'clock, talking all things Dolphins and Panthers. Coming up later tonight, 8 p.m. Eastern, we have the Extra Mile, Daryl, Christopher, and Michael talking the latest in racing. And then our newest show, Gateway Game Day, Landon talking all St. Louis sports. That's at 10 p.m. So glad that now we got 4 shows here on Thursday. We are slowly catching up to the Tuesday slate. That's like our big primetime schedule. We got like 6-7 shows on Tuesday, but definitely a lot of fun. Ricky Keeler back with you on IE Sports Radio, direct feed for all that is sports. Wrapping up the show, and we got to talk, of course, the New York Mets, who The, of course, Subway Series was this week. Mets won the first 2 games at Citi Field a month ago. They go back to Yankee Stadium. And look, there's no way to say it. The Mets made an absolute statement in all 4 games. First time that the Mets have swept the Yankees in the Subway Series since 2013. And you look at the way both these games are different. You had the first game, the Mets won 3-2. Jeff McNeil hits a 2-run homer off former Met Michael Tonka in the 6th. And I thought Carlos Mendoza did a really good job in this series. And when you look at the 2 managers, of course, Mendoza was Boone's former bench coach with the Yankees. You can tell some Yankee fans wish they had Mendoza as manager for knowing, hey, the Yankees only have 2 hitters, as Luis Severino was joking with some of his old teammates. Well, that's true. So if they only got Juan Soto and Aaron Judge that are really the big threats in that lineup, why pitch to Aaron Judge? He intentionally walked him 3 times with Quintana. Daniel Nunez intentionally walked him in the 7th, got out of trouble. So then Jake Diekman's pitching because Edwin Diaz threw 20-plus pitches the night before in Miami. And Diekman goes after Judge. And I think it shocked everybody that he went after him and struck him out looking. I even think Judge was shocked he got pitches to hit in that situation. But essentially the Mets lulled Aaron Judge to sleep. And those are the things that the Yankees are going to see from other teams going forward until they fix that lineup. But we'll dive into that in a little bit. But give a ton of credit to Mendoza. That's a veteran manager move. Good things there. Francisco Lindor hits 2 home runs last night. Pete Alonso homers last night. Tyrone Taylor goes deep against Garrett Cole. And you look at Francisco Lindor. And I know he's going to have a tough time winning MVP because let's be honest, Shohei Ohtani is probably going to win MVP of the National League. But to me right now, Lindor is making a case to be in the running for MVP. If you take out his first month of the year, which was absolutely awful, since like mid-May, he has been a big difference to this Met team. He's a great leader in the clubhouse. He's now over 20 home runs on the year. He's getting extra base hits. He's providing a spark at the top of the order. He's doing everything you could ask him to. And when Brandon Nimmo's struggling like he is right now, Pete Alonso's been battling some slumps throughout the year. Lindor's kind of been the linchpin of this, and I was talking to Ralph off air. Ralph, of course, is here, and we'll dive into Ralph's comment in a minute. That imagine what this team would be if Lindor had a great April, at least a good one, and Mark Vientos began the year at third base because Vientos hit another home run last night. There'd be a much different ball club. But right now, the Mets 1-9 with Jeff McNeil hitting 4 home runs in this week, they have been a different team. They're more well-rounded offensively. Now, they have some issues, at least in the outfield, with Starling Marte still being out and Harrison Bader still being out. But they're clicking at the plate. And that's a good sign. They don't have an easy out in that lineup right now, especially when you're batting Francisco Alvarez. Even Luis Torrens has done a good job behind the plate. So they have done a good job in fixing all these things offensively, which I think has to make the Yankees jealous that they've figured stuff out. Which leads into a huge series they've got this week against the Atlanta Braves. The Braves are reeling. Mets right now are 2.5 behind them for that first wild card spot. And Ronald Acuna is hurt. Spencer Strider's hurt. Ozzie Albies is hurt. Now, they do get Austin Riley back for paternity leave tonight. But the Braves had to have a players-only meeting last week. And I don't think it's because they've been scuffling necessarily. They haven't hit. And it makes sense. Since Ronald Acuna came out of the lineup, they haven't been a good offense. And you have the pitching, if you're the Mets here, you're supposed to. Big pitching matchup tonight, by the way, at Citi Field. Luis Severino against Chris Sale. Sale has been arguably the best pitcher of the National League this year. It's got 13 wins. Sale was supposed to pitch last night against the Reds, but that game got postponed. One of those doubleheader games that they had that they have to make up in September. But one thing you know about Luis Severino is he thrives in these kind of games. He's going to bring the energy. He's going to bring the adrenaline. Can he harness that adrenaline and put up a good performance? Because this is a huge series for the Mets. If they can take 3 out of 4 or even split, that's going to send a message to David Stearns in that front office to buy players. None of this, we're going to buy and sell because it doesn't fit our long-term plan. The Mets have shown you over the last 2 months, since that homestand from hell in late May, they have been worth investing in. Whether that's adding another starting pitcher somewhere, now that Christian Scott is out with the UCL sprain, and they're calling up Tyler McGill to pitch on Saturday. They could use another starter there. But you're seeing like Quintana can only go so much, can only go a few, like 5 innings. Minaya can only go 5 innings. You have to invest in this team. And it starts with the bullpen. But chance for Severino to get things started off right tonight. Kodai Senga makes his 2024 debut tomorrow. That's going to be a big thing in Citi Field. There's fireworks night tomorrow at the ballpark, which is going to be great. Look, these games are going to be electric. They're going to feel like playoff games. The Met fan base is bought in. There's optimism. Things looking really good. Which leads to the trade deadline Tuesday, and Ralph brings up here any rumors for the Mets at the trade deadline. Well, I think right now, you look at this Met team, what's their biggest need is probably bullpen. They've got to get relievers. Reed Garrett's out. He's trying to work his way back. They don't have Brooks Raley the rest of the year. They don't have Drew Smith the rest of the year. Sean Reed Foley's on a rehab assignment. They're going to have to go for relief pitching. Now, there are guys they can go get. Estevez from the Angels is an interesting name. Tanner Scott, if they want to go in division, make a deal with the Marlins. We saw they did that last year, selling David Robertson to Miami. They could make that happen. Would they make a deal with the Nationals in division to try to get Kyle Finnegan? That would be another name to look at. They've got to get creative in adding relief pitching. They added Phil Maton, which is a nice addition, but they have to get 1 or 2 more relievers. You have to find a way to make a reliable bridge to Edwin Diaz. You're seeing Adam Ottavino pitch in the 5th and 6th inning in some of these games because those have been the big outs. So Ottavino get Volpe out in a big spot last night when the Yankees had bases loaded in the 5th. But they have to get reliable options. The other thing would be outfield. I think to add to insurance for either Bader or Marte, there's a couple of names that are interesting. One would be a relatable name, Mark Canha from the Tigers. Could the Mets acquire him back? Canha loved it in New York. A player that could thrive there, good platoon option in left field. Jesse Winker with the Nationals would be another interesting name. They need a 4th outfield type. They don't need to go out and add a big bat. And let's be honest, as we'll get into with the Yankees, there's not a lot of big bats out there that they're going to get. Especially with Alonso staying put. Vlad Jr. is probably staying put. There's not a big bat on the market. So you've got to get creative and try to add one of these smaller outfield pieces. You can maybe put on the bench, get a spot start here or there, upgrade your bench, do a little bit different things like that. But to me, the biggest things for the Mets, bullpen first, outfielder second, and maybe a starting pitcher. But I think that they're fine rotation-wise if Scott can get back at the end of the year because you still have Quintana, you still have Senga coming back, now returning at least. Severino's pitching well because the one thing you worry about now with the Mets, with the Scott stuff, remember, they got a lot of guys battling innings. And I thought the biggest concern for me when Scott went down was they were going to put Jose Butto back in the rotation. I'm glad to see they're not doing that. Jose Butto belongs in the bullpen. He's been a better option in the bullpen. It reminds me too much of a Seth Lugo spot. Like, to me, that would be the most alarming thing is if you start rotating guys back and forth. You can't have that. It's got to be one or the other. So that's something to keep an eye on. Now let's talk Yankees, who look absolutely miserable. Aaron Boone says stuff that makes me cringe every night when I watch the game. Because I love that he got angry last night because I was looking for him to get angry, but then he keeps saying like everything's in front of us and this is only a stretch of games. It's been 35 games that the Yankees have been one of the worst teams in baseball. They have rivaled Adams' Chicago White Sox for being the worst team in the sport over the last month. And when you hear Boone last night praising the at-bats of a team down 10 runs in the 8th, it made me want to make my head spin. Because you wonder what game he's watching that we're not watching. And I get it. He can't rip the players. I understand that. But at some point, these players got to get ripped or somebody's got to have a players-only meeting in that clubhouse. Because what did the Mets do well? When they were struggling in late May, those players formed a meeting in the clubhouse to fix it. You don't see a Yankee coming out, and maybe they did privately, I don't know. But publicly, we do not know of any players meeting or team meeting. They need that. They need a real kick in the butt. They need a kind of snap back into reality kind of thing because Gleyber Torres had a good series. He had a couple home runs against the Mets. I can't think of another player that had a really good series. They have nothing in this lineup right now besides Soto and Judge that makes you want to turn on the television screen. And what was a joke on Tuesday was they hit Jahmai Jones leadoff as the DH, which I kind of joked that he's not a DH, barely even a hitter, yet alone a designated hitter. And J.D. Davis, who hadn't played in 2 weeks, is batting cleanup. And the manager is talking about his good at bats against Quintana, how Quintana made Davis look crazy. Davis could look bad because he hasn't played baseball in a couple weeks, and you're hitting him cleanup. So I don't know whose fault the line construction was, but that was terrible. And it seems like this team is relying on Giancarlo Stanton to bail out all their problems. And we don't know where Stanton is right now. He's been taking BP this week. Will he get a rehab assignment? Will he play this weekend in Boston? Because the Red Sox are coming right behind him. Boston's beaten him 4 of the last 6 times. You're telling me if you're a Yankee fan, you're confident going to Fenway this week and then playing the Phillies right before the deadline? No. They are reeling, and I don't know how they're going to get out of it. Garrett Cole was terrible last night, gave a bunch of home runs. The Mets seem to own him for some reason. Their bullpen's been okay. But again, when you look at the trade deadline, what can the Yankees realistically get? They have to get bullpen help. Tanner Scott, we mentioned same names mentioned with the Mets, the Yankees going to be looking into. Do they look at adding an infielder, particularly one that can play some third base? Because DJ LeMahieu isn't the answer. Oswaldo Cabrera isn't the answer. They need to get somebody to play the hot corner. Because at least first base, you've got Rice, you've got Rizzo. Could you get somebody that's like a third-first hybrid? I guess you could. But they need a bat. You can't. Giancarlo Stanton can't be the answer to everything. And it sounds like Jason Dominguez is going to come back from his rehab and go to Scranton Wilkes-Barre. Jason Dominguez better be here soon. Because that was the guy Brian Cashman put his hopes into. They relied on Jason Dominguez being there in case when Stanton got hurt. And when Stanton got hurt, Dominguez got hurt. They have nothing in the minors right now. They can't call anybody up. They don't have an answer in AAA in terms of the pitching. That's on the front office. So while I want to sit here and blame Aaron Boone and do all these things, Brian Cashman, this is a big trade deadline for him. He's got to get it right. Because right now they have nothing. Verdugo has been disappointing over the last 2 months in left field. They don't have much outside of Soto and Judge in the outfield. LeMahieu's been bad at third base. Jose Trevino gets hurt. Now you get Austin Wells, who I thought has played well, along with Narvaez behind the plate. They've got to get something to help this offense, and it's not just Stanton. So to me, you're looking at a bat. You're looking at a couple of bullpen arms, maybe a starter, though Clark Schmidt seems to be progressing in his rehab. The problem the Yankees have is they have too many holes and not enough time to address them, and not enough trade pieces to address them. I'm not looking at getting Garrett Crochet. I'm not looking at getting Luis Robert. But they've got to be able to get some pieces. They've got to make 3 or 4 small deals to make this work. And I don't know how Brian Cashman's going to do it. He's shown it in the past. This is a big deadline for him. He's got to get it right. Speaking of getting it right, the Knicks got it right as they added Tom Thibodeau to a new 3-year contract extension this week. And look, they had to do this. This is absolutely the right move. When you think about the culture Tom Thibodeau has done in changing this New York environment, getting to an Eastern Conference semifinal last year. He's gotten the Knicks to the playoffs 3 times in 4 years. He's got a 175 and 143 record. And he's got the chance to be the longest tenured coach since James Dolan's been the owner. And that's a big deal. Like you talk about the offseason the Knicks have had, this is the cherry on the offseason Sunday, if you will, for the Knicks. They have done a really good job in that regard. So they're still looking for that big man. We'll see if they get it. But the more important thing is they've locked Thibodeau up for the next few years while this core has the best chance to win. And over the end of this contract extension, we'll see if Thibodeau's ways are the right ways to get to a championship. But good to see him get rewarded with a contract that he absolutely earned. So big thing this week as we wrap up with some soccer. Now, there are some international friendlies taking place this week in New York City. Manchester City against AC Milan. That game is going to be at Yankee Stadium coming up on the 27th. So that would be on Saturday. That should be a fun matchup. Those are exhibitions, remember, so it's not going to be one of those things where you might not get to see some of those stars that often, but it's still a good atmosphere. And then at Red Bull Arena on Wednesday, RB Leipzig takes on Aston Villa. So you're going to have that's at Red Bull Arena in New Jersey. So if you're looking to get to a cool international soccer match, those would be two matches I would highly recommend checking out. The other interesting soccer tournament, while the Olympics, of course, are going on, watched a little bit of the U.S. match against France yesterday with John Tolkien, is going to be Leagues Cup. Leagues Cup is when you get like the MLS, Liga, the teams out in Mexico. Those are fun matchups there. So some things to look forward to this week. On Saturday, the Red Bulls will take on Toronto. That game is at 8 o'clock at Red Bull Arena. So get a good Leagues Cup matchup there. And then NYFC is going to be at Yankee Stadium this week, and they're going to be taking on a team from Mexico. We'll pull up that matchup for you here. Cuadrado is going to be the matchup. That's a group stage play. Again, each team is going to play their group stage twice and eventually go into one of those knockout brackets. So this is kind of a fun mid-season tournament while MLS gets a break. You'll see some cool Leagues Cup action, and it should be a lot of fun. So I would go to one of those international games. I think it's going to be really cool, especially Yankee Stadium, Man City, the partnership with NYCFC. When you get a Italian team against a Premier League team, that's always good. And then Leipzig being a German team against a Premier League team in Aston Villa. So we long for these kind of like great international matchups or things to promote the sport while the Olympics, of course, are going on. I'm sure there'll be some good local things that we'll cover throughout the course of the Olympics. I was reading something about how there's a Moroccan swimmer who goes to NJIT who's going to be competing this weekend. That should be really cool. But get out some of these League Cup matches and some friendlies matches. Those will be a lot of fun. The other local things I like looking forward to are the Mid-Atlantic matchups as some of these New York, New Jersey teams try to qualify for the Little League World Series at the end of August. So always some good things there. But definitely some good international soccer matchups to keep in mind over the course of the next few weeks. We'll have the U.S. Open next month, which I think will be a lot of fun. We'll dive into some tennis. Andy Murray, of course, won't be there because he decided to retire from a singles career, can't participate in singles in the Olympics. Yannick Sinner is out of the Olympics, so it could be Djokovic Nadal in round 2, which should be fun. Yeah, Ralph, I agree. Yankees are a worry right now. And I think to touch on one more thing on the Yankees, Alex Cora getting a contract extension for the Red Sox. When I heard that yesterday, I was like, that to me was the guy I wanted to replace Aaron Boone with. If the Yankees decided to make a managerial change, that can't happen now, unfortunately. So they're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place there. Look, there's pressure on Boone. There's pressure on Cashman. What I'm tired of this Yankee front office doing is pretending that we don't know anything. And it seems like they're naive to everything going around them. And they have to push a button and they think they're going to flip a switch and things are going to get better again. That's clearly not the case. And the problem they have, we could do a deeper dive of this in a future episode. They get a new hitting coach every year. So at some point, shouldn't the person picking the hitting coaches be the one that gets put on the hot seat? And there was a good tweet by Ty Butler, who works at ESPN Radio New York that I saw yesterday. And it made me think about it a little bit. The longer Brian Cashman gets removed from the championships that the Yankees won, of course, they haven't won a title in 15 years, the more he's going to get remembered for wasting Garrett Cole, Aaron Judge, and Juan Soto in their primes. You only have Juan Soto for 3 months. If you got to get rid of some of the big pieces in the farm to make a deal happen, you do it. Because this team is built on trying to win a world championship. This organization is preached championship or bust. Whether they believe it or not internally anymore, I don't know. But they've told it to the fan base enough. And look, the Yankee fan took a shellacking and deserves to take all the rap that the Met fan is going to give them. They deserve it. The Mets right now are playing like a playoff team. The Yankees are playing like a team that who knows where the heck they're going. And they are very fortunate that they're only going to be 2 games back in the division because Baltimore lost 2 or 3 to the Marlins. Which I'm sure is making Mike Pat crazy. But a lot of issues that they've got to fix. So as we wrap up the show here today, again, some good things going on. Giants-Jets training camp underway. We'll get into some preseason games throughout the course of the next few weeks. Again, I think more expectations for the Giants. I mean, for the Jets and the Giants are just hoping that Daniel Jones stays healthy. For the Jets, you need to get to the playoffs. Aaron Rodgers is going to get to the playoffs at the least. Anything less, Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh are out of a job. Big time in college football. Again, I think Syracuse, Rutgers, and Army, where they won't make the playoffs, but they won't compete for the playoffs, are going to have some good seasons for sure. I think this is a team that can. These are three teams that can definitely make some noise in their respective conferences. Will they win them? Probably not. But I think they could definitely make some noise. The Mets are making some noise. It's going to be a fun time against the Braves. But out to the ballpark at Citi Field this week. It's going to be a lot of fun. The Yankees are a fun way to take on the Red Sox. Boston's beat them 4 of the last 6 times. Red Sox fans, even though they got blown up by Colorado, is going to feel optimistic about this series because they can run on the Yankees and they will run and run and run some more. Can the Yankee bats find a way to wake up? Or will they end July the same way they started it? In an absolute rut. When we come back next Thursday, what's the trade deadline look like? Will both these teams actually land pieces they're looking for? Does David Stearns get aggressive? Does Brian Cashman get aggressive? Both these teams are looking for playoff spots. It's time for those GMs to show their teams that they are worth adding to it and getting them help. I think the Yankees getting swept by the Mets because they cried for help for Brian Cashman. Aaron Boone won't say it, but I will say it. That deal done. You absolutely no choice. Tom Thibodeau, of course, gets his deal done. And it's excited to see those contract extensions. So next week, more updates from training camp, more updates from the Mets and Yankees and trade deadline. We'll do an Olympics update and so much more. Thank you for tuning in this week to New York State Sports and Sports Radio, your direct feed for all those sports. From all of us here at the network, I'm Ricky Keeler saying enjoy the rest of your day. And I will see you back here next week as we begin the month of August. Until then, enjoy the rest of the day, everybody.